Hey friends, so today we're going to talk about the connection between the liver and our emotional health and hormonal chaos that disconnection can cause. I'm Dr. Riley. Today we're going to dive into something that might revolutionize actually how you think about your health. It's the powerful connection between your emotions and your liver and your stress and your hormones and the pattern of hypervigilance that might be keeping you stuck in exhaustion cycles. If you've been waking up between 1 and 3 in the morning for no apparent reason, if you feel wired but tired, no matter how much you rest, or if you find yourself consistently scanning for threats, this conversation is especially for you. And I'm speaking from personal experience here because we are going to explore how emotional processing directly affects your physical detoxification and hormonal balance. My own personal journey began with my own need for healing and the lessons learned from watching my own mother's health struggles. After witnessing my mother's battle with chronic anxiety that eventually manifested into serious illness, I discovered firsthand how our bodies keep the score of our emotional lives. Her journey taught me that hormonal health and emotions, they're not separate issues, right? They are intimate partners in your body's complex communication system. And I learned the hard way that unexpressed emotions weren't just psychological burdens. They were creating real physiological blocks in my own hormonal detoxification pathways. And after watching my mother's health deteriorate under the weight of unexpressed feelings, I recognized how our emotional and physical detoxification systems are intimately connected. My own dark night of the soul followed years of hypervigilance, codependency patterns, and a profound disconnection from my authentic self. See, growing up, managing my mother's emotions, I developed an exquisite sensitivity to the emotional states of others, constantly scanning the subtle shifts that might require my attention or my intervention. What I didn't understand was how directly this hypervigilance was affecting my own cortisol patterns and liver function consequently. Every scan for potential threats, every moment spent in other people's emotional worlds, every boundary crossing I allowed was keeping my stress response system chronically activated. The turning point came when I recognized that what I called being sensitive or being responsive was actually a trauma response, keeping my nervous system in a state of perpetual vigilance. This state made my healthy cortisol rhythm and proper liver detoxification physiologically impossible. And today, I love to turn these lessons around and help people transform their relationships with themselves by addressing these connections between emotions, detoxification, and hormonal health, because I've learned that our bodies speak a language we need to understand if we want to truly heal. So let's start with something that Western medicine rarely discusses. It's the intimate connection between your liver function and your emotional processing. Interestingly enough, in traditional Chinese medicine, spring is the season of the liver. This is our primary organ of detoxification for both hormones and emotions. Just as the liver processes toxins from our blood, it's actually associated with processing emotions, particularly anger, frustration, and resentment. The liver emotion connection works kind of something like this. So your liver processes hormones and emotions in traditional Chinese medicine. Emotional stagnation can reflect in physical detox capacity. Spring is the liver's natural season for renewal. Unexpressed emotions create additional detox burden. Anger, frustration, resentment particularly affect liver function, and signs your liver might need support: waking between 1 and 3 in the morning. This is the liver time in Chinese medicine. Irritability and impatience without real clear triggers, or overreacting. Eye issues like twitching or dryness, difficulty digesting fats or alcohol, hormone-related headaches or skin breakouts. See, the turning point in my own healing came when I recognized how my patterns of self-silencing, people-pleasing, and boundary violations were creating a perfect storm of emotional stagnation. Every suppressed feeling, every swallowed no, every resentment, I didn't acknowledge that I was actually creating an additional burden on my detox pathways. So the question then comes, how do emotional patterns affect detoxification? Well, it's really actually fascinating. So unexpressed emotions require physiological resources to contain. People-pleasing creates resentment that burns the liver. Boundary violations lead to anger that affects the liver meridian. Self-silencing causes emotional congestion, similar to physical stagnation. Perfectionism keeps the body in the stress response and hypervigilance that actually impairs detox. Supporting the liver function in the spring means addressing both physical and emotional dimensions. So you can do things like incorporate bitter greens like dandelion and arugula into your diet. Practice emotional expression through journaling. Try gentle liver-supporting movement like twists and side stretches. Reduce alcohol, which directly burdens liver function. You could set one boundary that's been causing resentment or holdup for you. I approach liver health through what I call the discovery method. This incorporates things like diet, so liver-supporting foods, intuition, so honor emotions as they arise rather than suppressing, somatic, so feel where resentment lives in your body, the body itself, practice physical release through movement, work on outlook, like shift from perfectionism to self-compassion. Just give you an example. But here's the thing, I give you permission to express difficult emotions. Your anger contains wisdom about your boundaries. You can release resentment that's burdening your system. The relationship between your liver and your emotions mirrors the most fundamental relationship in your life. That's the one you have with yourself. And when you silence your emotions, you judge them as inappropriate or push them aside to care for others, you engage in a form of self-abandonment that actually your liver registers physically. Just as your liver needs to process and release toxins to function optimally, your emotional self needs acknowledgement and expression for your whole being in order to thrive. This isn't just about physical detoxification. It's about honoring your complete self, including the parts you've learned to hide. My mother's own journey showed me that emotional suppression wasn't just a psychological pattern. It was a physical burden her body carried until it could no longer cope. So now let's explore something that's especially relevant as spring transitions into summer in this month of May. The powerful connection between light exposure, hormonal balance, and our patterns of isolation. I learned the hard way that authentic connection can't be found in isolation. After my mother's passing, I retreated into workaholic tendencies and achievement addiction, unconsciously recreating childhood patterns of emotional disconnection. What I didn't understand at the time was that how profoundly this isolation was affecting my hormonal health. The light hormone connection is profound. Sunlight directly triggers hormone production. Morning light exposure sets cortisol rhythm for the day. Light regulates melatonin for sleep quality. Natural light exposure balances mood regulating hormones. Seasonal light changes require intentional adaptation. But there's a deeper pattern of isolation that often underlies disconnection from natural light. Isolation often begins as a protection against vulnerability. Digital connection can substitute for actual, real, authentic connection. Achievement addiction can mask loneliness. Work becomes refuge from relationship discomfort. Disconnection becomes both symptom and cause of hormonal imbalance. Light exposure isn't just about vitamin D, folks. It's about synchronizing your entire hormonal orchestra. Morning sunlight sets your cortisol rhythm for the day. Midday light supports serotonin production, and then evening darkness triggers melatonin. When we live disconnected from natural light, our hormones operate without their natural conductor. I think of light exposure as connection medicine, right? So morning sunlight synchronizes your hormonal rhythms. Midday light supports vitamin D production. Evening light reduction signals relaxation hormones. Natural light connects you to these seasonal rhythms, and light exposure combats both physical and emotional winter. The turning point in my healing came when I recognized that my tendency towards isolation wasn't a personality trait. It was a protection mechanism with roots in childhood experiences. Just as I needed to reconnect with natural light to balance my hormones, I needed to reconnect with the authentic relationship that I had to heal my nervous system. My personal Phoenix process from isolation to connection involved recognizing isolation as self-protection, not self-care, accepting vulnerability as a gateway to authentic connection with others and myself, creating physical practices that support emotional shifts, using nature connection to heal nervous system dysregulation, and finding safety in authentic expression rather than performance. Spring light practices for hormonal balance include beginning the day with 10 minutes of unfiltered morning light, take outdoor breaks at would be your solar noon when possible, reduce blue light exposure after sunset, that's screen time basically, create evening wind down rituals as days lengthen, and align social activities with natural daylight when possible. I give you permission to prioritize connection. You deserve connection with nature and with others. And your nervous system heals through safe relationship. Your isolation protection was not Jad. It's not a personality trait. The patterns I recognize in myself, the people pleasing, the achievement, the addiction, to all of that, the disconnection from my body's wisdom, these weren't personality traits. They were survival strategies passed down through generations, adaptations to conditions my ancestors faced that no longer serve in today's world. In choosing a different way of relating to myself, I'm not just addressing my individual health, I'm participating in healing that extends backwards to honor the struggles of those who came before me and forward to create new possibilities for those who will come after and be a ripple effect out to the world. You have that power too. This intergenerational perspective gives deeper meaning to the daily practices of self-connection. Each time you choose to listen to your body instead of overriding it, you're not changing your hormonal patterns. You're helping to rewrite a family story of self-relationship that can transform the health and well-being of an entire lineage. So let's talk about something that might be silently disrupting your health, and that's going to be the connection between hypervigilance and cortisol patterns. I discovered my hypervigilance wasn't just anxiety, it was a sophisticated survival strategy that actually began in childhood. Growing up, managing my mother's emotions, I developed an exquisite sensitivity to the emotional states of others, constantly scanning for subtle shifts that might require my attention or intervention. So first, let's understand cortisol's role. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. It's designed for short-term emergency response. It helps regulate blood sugar and metabolism, and it affects every cell and system in your body. It works best in healthy rhythm, not constant elevation. Signs your cortisol rhythm is disrupted include morning fatigue and afternoon energy crashes, that wired and tired feeling, especially at bedtime, anxiety that increases during calm moments, craving sugar and salt or caffeine for energy, difficulty recovering from minor stressors. The hypervigilance cortisol connection explains so much. So hypervigilance keeps stress response chronically activated. Childhood emotional management creates vigilance patterns. Scanning for threats becomes unconscious baseline where you're at. Nervous system gets stuck in sympathetic fight or flight dominance. Boundary violations maintain hypervigilance state. My own hypervigilance developed through managing my mother's anxiety, which taught me emotional caretaking. Learning safety came through monitoring others' emotions, developing attunement to subtle shifts in the environment, creating patterns of sacrificing needs for others, using achievement as protection against vulnerability. But the turning point in my healing journey came when I recognized what I called being sensitive or being responsible was actually a trauma response, keeping my nervous system locked in a state of perpetual vigilance. This state made healthy cortisol rhythm physiologically impossible. But you could break that cycle. And breaking the hypervigilance cycle requires creating emotional cues for safety for your nervous system, establishing clear boundaries to reduce hypervigilance, practicing presence instead of scanning for future threats, developing self-regulation skills for stress response, and remembering hypervigilance wasn't protection, it was not a flaw. Remember, you are safe enough to relax your vigilance. Others' emotions are information, not emergencies. Your nervous system deserves regular signals of safety. Now, finally, let's explore how codependency patterns actually directly affect your stress hormones and what you can do to break this cycle. I spent years ignoring my body's signals about my relationships until physical symptoms became way too loud to dismiss. Growing up, managing my mother's chronic anxiety, I developed a nervous system wired for hypervigilance and people-pleasing. Always scanning, always adjusting, always abandoning myself to tend to others. The cortisol codependency connection is really quite profound. Codependency keeps stress response chronically activated, and managing others' emotions triggers cortisol release. Then boundary violations signal danger to nervous system. People-pleasing creates biological stress states, and hypervigilance depletes stress resilience over time. Your body speaks to you through specific signals, things like fatigue that worsens after certain interactions with people or situations, tension headaches related to relationship stress, digestive issues triggered by boundary violations, sleep disruption connected to relationship dynamics, anxiety that increases before social obligations. I've been through all of these. Codependency often develops through childhood roles as emotional regulators, learning that safety came through managing others' feelings, developing identity connected to usefulness and helpfulness, creating patterns of self-abandonment for connection, and using hypervigilance as protection against rejection. Sound familiar? What I didn't realize was how this codependency pattern was directly affecting my stress hormones, though. Every time I took responsibility for someone else's emotions, my cortisol would spike. Every boundary I failed to set kept my nervous system in a state of high alert. Every instance of people-pleasing signaled danger to my body, even as my mind called it being kind or being responsible. The physical costs of codependency are real. Chronic cortisol elevation disrupts all hormonal systems. Nervous system gets stuck in sympathetic on position, fight or flight. Immune function becomes compromised by ongoing stress, and digestive issues stemming from nervous system dysregulation become chronic, and even sleep quality is reduced by boundary violations. The turning point in my own healing journey came when I connected my physical symptoms to specific relationship patterns. The fatigue after certain interactions, the headaches before family events, the digestive issues when I couldn't say no. These weren't random malfunctions, but my body's wisdom speaking the truth. My people-pleasing patterns would not allow me to acknowledge. Breaking the cycle for hormonal healing means a few different things. Recognizing the difference between helping and caretaking, practicing tolerating others' uncomfortable emotions, developing self-regulation for boundary-setting discomfort, creating physical practices for nervous system safety, remembering relationship patterns have physical consequences. I give you permission to set boundaries. You are not responsible for managing others' emotions. Your nervous system deserves protection through boundaries. Others' discomfort with your limits is not an emergency. As we wrap up today, I want to reflect on what we've explored together a little bit to summarize here. So we've seen how your liver processes both physical toxins and emotional stagnation, and how unexpressed emotions create an additional burden on your detox pathways. We've also discussed how light exposure synchronizes your hormonal rhythms and how isolation patterns affect both your physical and emotional health. We've recognized how hypervigilance keeps your stress response chronically activated and how childhood patterns of emotional management create vigilance that depletes your cortisol resilience. And we've also explored how codependency patterns trigger stress hormone release and how boundary violations signal danger to your nervous system. So the common denominator running through all of these is the relationship you have with yourself. When you abandon yourself through suppressing emotions, isolating from connection, maintaining hypervigilance, or prioritizing others' needs before your own, You're not just making emotional choices. You are triggering physiological changes that affect your hormones, your detoxification, your metabolic health, and ultimately your capacity for authentic wellness. And I just want to leave you with this. Your healing journey begins with being seen, heard, and understood, starting with how you see, hear, and understand yourself. And this first step isn't another supplement. It's not another diet. It's reconnecting with your body's signals that you've been trained to ignore. It's recognizing the wisdom in your emotions, even the uncomfortable ones. It's honoring your need for both connection and boundaries as well. And the journey from self-abandonment to self-discovery becomes most visible in how we process both physical toxins and emotional experiences. And when you begin treating your feelings, especially difficult ones like anger or resentment, as messengers rather than nuisances, you're not just supporting your liver's physical function. You're reclaiming the relationship with yourself that creates the foundation for authentic connection with others. This work matters way beyond individual healing. When we transform our relationship with our emotions, we break intergenerational patterns that have kept families stuck in cycles of unexpressed feeling and mysterious illnesses for generations. Your healing becomes a powerful legacy that extends far beyond your own life. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If this resonated for you, let me know. Let me know maybe something else you might want to learn more about. If this really, really spoke to you, please feel free to share this with others. Again, I thank you for being here.